And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And we're going to go ahead and continue on with the list that I was doing previously of teams that made some risky offseason moves that could end up backfiring for them. Now, we left off with the Los Angeles Lakers, and we talked about their inactivity as opposed to their activity in the offseason. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to a team that actually really surprised me with this trade in the Pelicans. Now, I know DeJounte Murray, he's in a Hawks jersey now, but he's not going to be wearing a Hawks jersey anymore. As we know, he got traded over to the Pelicans in a very weak trade coming in from Pelicans' side. Like, I figured they would give up a little bit more, but they didn't for some reason. Like, the Hawks didn't really... Actually, no, it's a weak trade on the Hawks side, excuse me, because I thought the Hawks were going to get a little bit more out of DeJounte as opposed to what they already got. So, but still, this could end up being a big risk for the Pelicans. And now, the Pelicans, they may be rooting for the Lakers this season. And why do I say that? Because in the trade, the Pelicans gave up the Lakers' 2025 first-round pick. Now, if the Lakers play bad and they're going to have to, and if they get a high seed, then that's another pick. That's a pick that the Pelicans could have used in the draft, but ultimately won't be able to since they traded it away over to the Hawks. So this will be another time where the Hawks could get a really high first-round pick, but that's like it's all dependent on whether or not the Lakers are good or whether or not the Lakers are bad. Now, in a draft, especially in this draft, Cooper Flagg, and there are also several strong prospects in this draft, this upcoming draft, but Cooper Flagg is a very, very heavy favorite, especially after his recent performance against the United States team, like the Olympic team. He played really, really well, and everyone was very impressed with him. So he could be a very solid player coming out of this draft class. And the Pelicans, they could have sent a different first, like Milwaukee Bucks' 2025 first-round pick with a top 4 projection. Like, instead of sending the Lakers pick. The Lakers originally sent that pick to the Pelicans in the Anthony Davis trade, and Los Angeles probably isn't going to be a bottom feeder this season. Now, an injury to one of LA's stars could end up turn that pick into a really high pick in the draft. But still, you're sort of banking on another team to fail. And when the Lakers have a prime LeBron, you know that they are not tanking. If they are tanking with a prime LeBron, there is something wrong with the organization. That's all I'm going to say. Because if you have LeBron in your prime and you're just not doing anything to try to win, why? Just why? It's that simple. But next team on this list. Now, this is coming in from the Spurs. Now, I know Harrison Barnes is in a Kings jersey, but we haven't seen him in a Spurs jersey, so I apologize. I don't do jersey swaps. I don't have that ability to do that. Now, the Spurs, they gave up a pick swap for Harrison Barnes. Now, this could end up backfiring. Now, Detroit Pistons, I did not mean that. So, pick swaps are really abstract. So the Spurs won't be awful in 2031 when Victor Wembanyama should be well into his prime. But was Harrison Barnes a solid vet, but not a really landmark acquisition for San Antonio? Like, I don't really think that's going to really push them over the hump as much as they think it will. Like, is it really worth giving up an unprotected swap that far in the future? Now, what if the Spurs' fortunes change or they have a down year with injuries? Like, what current middle schooler are they risking? Like, this can't be answered for a long time, obviously. But if you look at the Boston Celtics, they ended up with Jason Tatum in 2017. The Nets didn't think that swap would be a problem when they acquired Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. And with all due respect to Barnes, those two were Hall of Famers. And so doing it for someone who isn't really a Hall of Famer, again, with all respect to Barnes, I don't really think it's not that good of a move. And especially when you consider, like, again, the Nets move was no better, especially in hindsight, because, again, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Like, are you kidding me? Like, how? But that's besides the point. So next is the Toronto Raptors as they pick up Bruce Brown Jr. and his player option. Now, it's a comparatively low stake. The Raptors picked up Bruce Brown's $23 million player option in late June. He's a very capable veteran, obviously, and he was a very important piece to the Nuggets and their championship team. But he doesn't have a role with the Raptors that really makes sense for the current salary that he's making. Now, many around the NBA believe that the Raptors kept Brown to use his contract as a trade asset, and the regret would come in Toronto can't really find a deal by February's deadline. So, unlike a lot of the other teams that are rather devastated with items on this list, it's just money for the Raptors. They're not losing a chance to advance to the NBA Finals or some star prospect 7 years down the line. It's just the opportunity cost of what else they could have done to improve without Brown taking up so much cap space with $23 million in their book. So that's sort of like, it's a real money problem. And that's like, I mean, from the bystander, a lot of people would think, okay, I mean, that's not that big of a deal. But from owner's perspective, paying this guy $23 million, obviously it's going to be a huge deal. Now, the next team is Contavious. Well, not the next team. The next team is the Nuggets, and the fact that they chose not to pay Contavious Caldwell-Pope. Now, from an accounting perspective, letting KCP leave in free agency to the Orlando Magic makes sense, but the Denver Nuggets let 20% of their championship starting lineup leave because of money. So it's like they're proving that they're rather cheap, and other organizations could end up snagging their players if they're not willing to, if the Nuggets don't seem willing to pay some of these players. And the new rules are also restrictive to teams with high payrolls, and Denver already lacked the depth. Now it lacks depth and is down a key starter, which is a very, very big problem. Like that is a huge problem for the Denver Nuggets, because like KCP is a very, very solid shooter, like a very solid shooter, and now he's on the Orlando Magic, and like Orlando, they were a playoff team last season and they lost in Game 7. So they could probably make a deeper run with KCP if they're able to hit a couple of threes. I mean, who knows? Now, the next one is another Denver Nuggets with Jamal Murray and his huge contract as well. So the team gave Jamal Murray a max extension, 4 additional years with $207.8 million. Now, when almost no one will have enough cap room for next summer in order to pay him, the Brooklyn Nets and Washington Wizards are the only team initially projected to have massive spending power and wouldn't have likely been suitors for Jamal Murray. And another thing to take into consideration is that this man is making $207.8 million despite not making an All-NBA team, not even making an All-Star team. Now, his finals performance was absolutely amazing, but again, he hasn't made an All-Star team or an All-NBA team. There's clearly other guards that have proven to be better than him, and you guys know my opinion on Jamal Murray. I mean, I feel like the only time that he really plays like he deserves more money than that, and just like 207 million or even more than 207 million, is when he goes up against the Lakers, where all of a sudden he turns into the greatest basketball player to ever live. Like, the shots that he makes against the Lakers are so insane. His true shooting percentage against the Lakers versus everyone else is insane. Like, it's amazing how well he plays against the Lakers. But from the team side, the logic is to give the stars you believe in the most, so you can win when you can. And it's not necessarily a wrong move, but it could lead to a lot of regrets coming in from the Nuggets. Others in a similar boat, paid more than the open market could bear, could also be the Celtics with Jason Tatum, Detroit Pistons with Cade Cunningham, Orlando Magic with Franz Wagner, and the Cavs with Evan Mobley. And there's no questioning that these players are talented, especially Jason Tatum, who just led the Celtics to a title. It's just the philosophy of paying out max without exploring the path of not paying a max, right? Like, I understand a lot of these players, they deserve to get paid for a lot of the things that they do for the organization, all the sweat, all the blood, all the grinding that they do. I totally understand that, and I'm happy that all of these guys are getting paid. But still, talking about from a business perspective, I feel like you should search other options as opposed to, focusing on that. There's two more moves left, and of course, we have to talk about the 76ers investing in Paul George. Now, the 76ers, they walk a very, very predictable path this summer. They acquire a star in free agency, everyone gets their hopes up, and usually along the line, Joel Embiid gets injured some point or another. And down in the postseason, that's usually when it happens. Joel Embiid gets injured in the postseason. They make it to the second round, and in the second round, they just choke. This is a cycle that's been going on for the 76ers for a very long time, aside from last year where they ended up losing earlier instead of the second round. They lost to the Knicks in the first round. And again, it's just a very, very predictable pattern. The Clippers chose not to bring back George, partly because of the NBA's new economics, but also because the team felt that his production had diminished. And he was an all-star, but one who often missed a lot of time, including some during the playoffs. Now, again, he did lead the Clippers to the only Western Conference Finals appearance of their entire franchise's history, but still, that doesn't deny the fact that he's also been injured a little bit in the postseason. Now, Philly's most significant problem has been getting into the postseason healthy. Now they add another player that's also injury-riddled, and it's like, how do you expect a team that's injury-riddled to be ready for the postseason? Like, you'd have to get very, very lucky. Like, it's very, very lucky, especially with this kind of team, because Joel Embiid has only played one postseason series where he ended up participating in every single win of that postseason series. He's been injured in every single postseason series, and that's really going to be their biggest problem. And finally, we have the Sacramento Kings and dealing with DeMar DeRozan. Now, the big question is DeMar DeRozan a good fit for this team? With DeMar DeRozan on the roster, along with Sabonis and along from De'Aaron Fox, those are three of your best players who aren't really known as dominant three-point shooters. So the lack of spacing might actually hurt the Sacramento Kings more so than these players might actually help the team. And in an era where a lot of teams shoot threes, that's very risky relying on the two-point mid-range jump shot that DeMar DeRozan loves to shoot. And again, it could really just affect the spacing of this team. Now, DeRozan, he's made a career in feasting in the mid-range without relying heavily on a three-point shot. But will that be available next to the Kings' pre-existing duo Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox? Because again, they also prioritize inside of the arc. So adding another player that prioritizes inside of the arc, it's like, where are we? Are we in the 1990s? And Coach Mike Brown should be able to manage his rotations to sort of offset the duplication over the course of the regular season. But it may be an issue in the end game when they get to the postseason where teams exploit their lack of three-point shooting. And does DeMar DeRozan really help the team where it arguably needed more support on the defensive side of the ball? Not entirely sure, because that was a big problem for the Kings last season. Their defense, it wasn't all that good. And now that they add DeMar, who isn't really known as a solid defender, who's just known as an offensive scorer, and even then, a rather inefficient offensive scorer considering his shot selection, inefficient in terms of shot selection, and inefficient in the postseason, by the way, I don't really know exactly how this team is going to fit. But I digress. We'll see how that goes into this season. That's all that I have for the offseason moves that could potentially backfire. So finally, we are going to go into the last segment where I talk about a very interesting loophole that the New York Knicks used in order to be able to get and acquire the star center in Karl Anthony Towns. It's a very, very interesting way that they did that, and it's a very surprising loophole, and it's like, it shows that the Knicks are like a lot smarter than you think they are. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.